And now I would like to ask Professor Roger Ellis, who came here this time. He's a renowned professor, visiting professor at many universities, but this time he's a guest from an enterprise named Identity Exploration Limited and connected to a social and health evaluation unit. Just let me make a personal remark. He's been my mentor in evaluation research for more than a decade now.
Well, James finished with thanks, and I'm going to start with thanks because even if you don't like what I'm saying, at least you'll know I'm grateful. I was very impressed with the Dean's introduction, because I too have been a Dean of a faculty like this in Northern Ireland and in England, and what he said about the integration of theory with practice really resonated with me. I think that's a marvelous way to view the work of this faculty. And I hope you'll all be going forth from this conference integrating theory with practice. I would like to thank very much the representative from the Ministry of Higher Education. Unfortunately, I couldn't follow your Hungarian, but I'd like to thank you for symbolizing the commitment in Hungary to innovation in higher education. And I'm going to be talking about program evaluation and the organization that I started called the Social and Health Evaluation Unit. Our slogan was, "No innovation without evaluation." No innovation without evaluation. So thank you very much. I would also like to thank Professor Clark, not only for his wide-ranging and penetrating and insightful speech. Frankly, I've learned more about social work over the last half hour than I've managed over my career, so thank you very much, James. But I also want to thank you for your company during this trip. James and I have met for breakfast, and being professors, we spend most of our time recommending books to each other. And I'm not just Wright Mills. Professors are like that. Not only do they bore each other, the students, but they bore each other by recommending books all the time. And what we did, we went back to classic books like Wright Mills and quite a few others. Well, thank you for that. And then finally, thank you to Marta Iodas, my colleague, over some years now. We met through an evaluation project. So that's one of the things that's kept my commitment to evaluation going, because I met Marta. And this is the third time I've been to Hungary. And this time I'm here paid for by a European scheme, bit of political slogan here, Erasmus. And Erasmus is meant to encourage exchange. And what I've found exciting about this visit, I don't know what I'm going to feed in, I hope something, but I've learned an awful lot from meeting people and an exchange of ideas about things that in one sense are strange and in another sense are familiar. And you can learn so much. Well, enough of that. Now, what am I going to be talking about? I'm going to be talking about program evaluation. And I discovered program evaluation around about the year 2000. Doesn't seem that long ago to me, but I'm sure it is quite a long time ago. And I'd spent a career in higher education as an applied psychologist. And until the year 2000, I'd never heard of program evaluation. So if none of you have heard of program evaluation, that doesn't surprise me. But I've become more and more enthusiastic about it over the years. And that's what I hope to communicate to you. What do we mean by program evaluation, and what use might it be to you? I've said a key to assuring quality in curriculum development. Yeah, it can do that, but it can do a lot of things as well. What I will be doing during this little lecture, I'll be covering these points. I'm going to, what is program evaluation? And if you don't know at the moment, I'm delighted, because at least you'll get something from my lecture. At the end of it, you may say, well, I'm not interested in it, but at least you'll have a bit more of an idea what it is. Why should it be used as part of curriculum development? Social work curricula are always renewing themselves, developing themselves, whether they like it or not. And if they don't want to do it themselves, there's people outside the university who will be encouraging them to do it, if accreditation is a form of encouragement. So curriculum development in social work education is irresistible. I'm suggesting that a program evaluation approach might be useful. How do I approach program evaluation? What's my thing? Well, my thing is that my colleagues and I, back in the year 2000, invented an approach. Wonderful, you can't invent much. We invented an approach called the trident. And as you know, a trident has 3 prongs. And human memory is such that remembering things in threes is quite easy. Magical number 3 in my case. When you talk about 3 things, people tend to remember it. Now, I'll be talking about an approach to program evaluation called the trident. I'll then be showing you the trident in action, and then I'm going to finish up with some tips. So you can go away with something and think, well, I could try this maybe. So that's the structure. Now, can I work this time, I hope? Yes. What is program evaluation? Now, this is a formal definition of program evaluation, and I don't apologize for that. Program evaluation is a systematic method whereby data and information are collected to answer questions about the success and methods of projects, policies, and programs. I'm just going to pause on that because program evaluation, to use a bit of jargon, it's a movable paradigm. You can apply it to anything. You could apply it to my lecture. You could say, what questions do I want to ask about this lecture? Was it boring? Was it interesting? Was I waiting to go away? Was I fed up with hearing him? Did I hear a few interesting ideas? Now, in asking those questions, you are evaluating. The program you're evaluating is my lecture. But you could be evaluating a whole social work program and asking a series of questions. Or you could be evaluating a whole university. Now, program evaluation is a way of asking questions systematically and then gathering data to answer those questions. Now, that's all very nice. Formal definitions are great. I'm going to throw in a couple of metaphors. Mixed metaphors, actually. I was always told not to mix metaphors. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give you 2 metaphors for program evaluation. One is, it's a bridge. A bridge. Between what and what? Well, between practice and policy. Because if you have some practice, whatever it is, let's say it's a social work program, and you evaluate it, you've then got a body of work which can bridge into policy. So the people who are formulating policy can say, should we do this? Should we do this again? Should we do it differently? And it'll be the program evaluation that will have bridged between practice and policy. So remember the bridge. My second metaphor is the Trojan horse. Now, you all know about the Trojan horse which was given as a gift, and it was a very sinister gift, because inside the horse were warriors who then came out in the city of Troy and destroyed the city. Now, why do I think program evaluation is a Trojan horse? Well, because it brings the social sciences, psychology, sociology, etc., to answer questions which people want answered. They don't know that they're bringing in psychology and sociology. They say, we'd like our program evaluated. But then the Trojan horse opens, and all the techniques of psychology, sociology, social policy can be used to answer the questions. So it's a benevolent Trojan horse. Not a destructive Trojan horse, but it is a Trojan horse. All right. Now, something you mightn't have known, maybe you didn't even want to know. Program evaluation is not invented by me. Program evaluation is a very well-established university discipline. In the United States, where in many ways it started, but in Europe, in Scandinavia, in Africa, in the Far East, it's a well-established academic discipline. What do I mean by that? Well, it's got professors. I'm not a professor of program evaluation, but I know quite a few of them. They're quite reasonable people. There are professors of program evaluation. There are departments of program evaluation. A big test is there are academic journals about program evaluation. Now that's how you demonstrate, one way, that you demonstrate a discipline exists. If somebody says there is a discipline of psychology, I can point to psychology professors. There's two of them here, actually. There may be more for all I know. I can point to departments of psychology, etc. Well, there are professors of program evaluation. Many universities have established a program evaluation function. So they actually have a department of program evaluation whose job is to constantly evaluate the programs of the university. I think it's a great idea. So the rector of the university, when he's deciding whether something new should be done, he can say, well, tell me about the program evaluation, which was carried out on this particular program. And he can draw on that knowledge. So program evaluation is a very potent discipline. Why should you bother with it? Now, you've got the idea that program evaluation means asking questions about a program and gathering evidence and producing a report at the end. Why should you bother? Well, first of all, accountability. And you heard a lot in James's speech about accountability to the society, to the immediate community, to the profession. Anybody who's running a social work program is accountable in multiple directions. And a good program evaluation, not necessarily saying everything's perfect, no, not at all, but a good critical program evaluation is a good way of demonstrating accountability. The first program evaluation I did was of a government scheme in the United Kingdom called Sure Start. Sure Start. And the idea of Sure Start was to try and help children between the ages of 1 and 4 to get a better start in life. What a wonderful idea. Because you could look at people in society and you could say, well, these children, they're lovely children, all children are, but the start they've got is so bad, they're not going to get anywhere. So the government scheme was, give them a sure start. One of the best things our government ever did, actually. I don't know where it came from, but it was a great thing to do. But one of the conditions they made in these schemes, and there were more than 400 of these schemes across the United Kingdom, 400, a condition of funding was you must have an external evaluation. So 10% of the budget had to be spent on program evaluation. And we won some contracts to do that, and that's where our work started. So it demonstrates accountability. It contributes to quality assurance during the conduct of the program and at the end of it. So in the jargon, it's both formative and summative. The information that's been gathered can be fed back usefully. This is a very important one. It gives a record of achievement. That's why I always say no innovation without evaluation. Because if you're innovative and you do something interesting, it's great at the time, but then it disappears. It disappears somewhere down the space-time continuum. Nobody knows what it was. It's all forgotten. And somebody else can reinvent it, of course. Now, the idea of program evaluation is there is a record of what happened, so other people can read it and they can learn from it. It provides data for research, and it contributes to the dissemination and publications about the innovation, whatever the innovation is. And then, as I said earlier with my bridge, it produces recommendations for policy and practice. So the Sure Start schemes I was talking about, the local one, once it got its evaluation report, that was published, and they're able to send it to people and say, look, this is what we did. These are the mistakes we made. These are the solutions we found. Academic publications came out of it. Some of the people in the Trojan horse, when they'd contributed to the program evaluation, they actually wrote academic papers from what they've been doing. So all of those things are why you should bother with it. Now, here it is, my trident. This is me in the role of Neptune. This is the evaluation trident. And the evaluation trident basically asks 3 big questions. First of all, did this program meet its objectives? Now that's a very big question, because programs are often meeting quite a number of different objectives. And some of the objectives are required by funders. Some of them are objectives which the faculty themselves set, but in an evaluation, those objectives have to be made manifest, and, this is the important bit, evidence has to be gathered to demonstrate the objectives are being met. So, for example, in the Sure Start scheme I talked about, one of the objectives was that the parents of disadvantaged children would come along to sessions and would learn ways in which they could help their children. Now, you can measure that quantitatively, how many people turned up, and that's a useful piece of information. Useful piece of quantitative information. If you claim you're going to attract parents, how many did you attract? But other objectives, of course, are rather subtler. It's going to change the attitudes of parents to the upbringing of their children. That's much harder to measure. Not impossible, but much harder. So fulfilling that first prong of the trident is very demanding, but very interesting and very fulfilling when you can see evidence that what you're trying to do is being achieved. The second prong of the trident is saying, all right, achieving objectives is one thing, but how did you do it? What was the process? So, looking at a social work curriculum, for example, one objective might be we have to produce on an annual basis 45 trained social workers who will work in the community. That's not a difficult objective to measure, but then you get into the quality of their work, it becomes more difficult. But then there's a whole set of other questions for the second prong. How was it done? How was the curriculum organized? How was it taught? What kind of learning experiences were there? So a good evaluation doesn't just look at outcomes, it looks at the process and what worked in the process and what didn't. Then the third prong of the trident, what did everybody think of it? All the different stakeholders. Well, let's take a social work program. Start with a good guy. What do the students think of it? What did the staff think of it? What did the practitioners who came in to help think of it? What did some clients out in the community who encountered students from the course, what did they think of it? Now, this is sometimes called a 360-degree analysis. If you wanted to evaluate something, get as many stakeholder views as possible. Now, those questions, they're not mutually exclusive, they overlap, etc., but they give three major emphases to a good evaluation. So if you're ever asked to evaluate anything, think of the trident. Did it achieve its outcomes? What was the process? And what did everybody think of it? Now, am I one of these professors who just says, this is a good idea, and then disappears? Well, possibly, but not in this case, because we've been running, my colleagues and I, a unit called the Social and Health Evaluation Unit, SHU, and SHU came into being in 2010, and it's now 2018, and over that period, we have evaluated more than 100 programs using the trident. So this is not just theory, this is practice. And this is another way of expressing the three prongs. You can have a look at that. It looks most impressive in Hungarian. I can't read a word of it, but it looks great. I'm going to give that to people in future. Say, what do you do, Professor? There it is. But it's in Hungarian. Certainly it's in Hungarian. You not want to work? Yeah, it'll get me a long way, I'm sure. Now, just going on to the record of evidence. Now, I told you that SHU has carried out more than 100 program evaluations, and they've all been paid for by somebody. I can tell you, the university loves SHU, because I would go to them and say, I don't need any money. People are going to pay for this program evaluation. So they all embrace me. What a wonderful professor. They have an expression, the professor is washing his own face. You heard that expression? And it means he's paying his way. And program evaluation in the university paid its way. And these are some of the programs we evaluated. And the evaluation was always paid for by some external agency. Training and education of nurses, the Sure Start program I mentioned, a police initiative called Safer Homes. Local police had to try and make people's homes safer from casual burglary, and they asked us to evaluate their program. And actually, I was almost disappointed. It worked. It worked. They achieved their outcomes. The process tell you one thing about the process. They had a leaflet printed on a footprint, and they pushed it through people's letterboxes, and it said, "This footprint could be a burglar. Have you thought of A, B, C, D?" That was part of their program. So we evaluated that. We evaluated a program in early language development. We evaluated a program rather ambitiously called Shaping the Future, which was about disseminating health knowledge. Not the most successful program, because disseminating health knowledge is one thing. People following health knowledge is a quite different one. So program evaluations show what works and what doesn't work. Personalization for learning disability, that was actually a favorite of mine, because this was a program to give people with profound learning disability some element, greater element, of choice in their lives. And I love to tell this little story about it. Sorry, I could go on about these, but this one. This particular person with learning disability was in hospital, being cared for in hospital, and she had a vocabulary of 2 words. 2 words. And one was no, which she used frequently, and the other was yellow. And nobody had an idea why she was saying yellow. Now, this program relocated people from hospital into sheltered accommodation. And in the sheltered accommodation, they had an element of choice about their furnishings and their curtains and their carpet. This woman's vocabulary increased over the first 6 months to more than 500 words. And a lot of these words were used to describe her environment. And the reason she kept saying yellow was she was very interested in colors. Now, I could go on about these, but one of the things that's marvelous about program evaluation is you get to evaluate innovations which you'd never have thought of yourself, but you get some of the reflected glory of understanding how well they work. Right, dementia support program, social work program reviews. That's why I'm speaking today, I suppose, that program evaluation, I'd commend it to anybody, any faculty here who have to review the program. Use a program evaluation approach. Try the Trident. You'll find it will give you a much better report. Tourism and gardens, village halls and carbon footprint. It's quite a variety. Now, my talk finishes with a set of tips. Tips for evaluators. Very precious, this. And some of the tips are questions you have to ask before you start the evaluation. And these are some of them. Why are you undertaking an evaluation at all? You've got to ask yourself that. Don't just do it because somebody says so. What do you expect from it? Is the whole program to be evaluated or just a part of it? What do you expect to get out of the evaluation? Who are the group who will be responsible for the evaluation and gathering data? That's very important. You say you're going to have a program evaluation approach to curriculum development, you've got to allocate responsibilities within the staff team. And people have to gather data for particular bits. Who is the leader and champion of the evaluation? One thing I've learned is an evaluation never works in an agency unless there is somebody who champions it. Could be a dean, could be a head of department, could be a member of faculty, but somebody needs to see it as their project and help it through. To whom will the evaluation make recommendations? I said a slogan is no innovation without evaluation. I'll give you another slogan, no evaluation without recommendations. If you don't make recommendations at the end of it, nothing will happen. So those are all questions before you start. Then there's a series of questions about outcomes. And I'm not going to read right through those, I haven't got time. But if you'd like to look at those in English or in Hungarian, I'm very grateful to whoever translated it, by the way, thank you very much. That will give you something to think about when it comes to outcomes, because outcomes are very varied, and they have various indicators, and they have various ways of gathering data. So it calls for a good deal of thought, worthwhile thought, of course. Then I've got a similar set of questions about the process. If you look at the transcript you've got, you'll find questions you should ask before you start, questions you should ask about outcomes, questions you should ask about process, questions you should ask about multiple stakeholder perspectives, and questions you should ask at the end when you're making your recommendations. And this is a key bit, actually. There's no point in an evaluation, let it go somewhere. What recommendations can be made regarding practice and policy? All of our evaluations finished up with 2 sets of recommendations. These are recommendations for improving practice, and these are recommendations for policymakers. And the great thing is, you see, for somebody in government like yourself, you don't have to follow these recommendations, of course, but at least you'll know that the evaluation has led to recommendations. To whom will these recommendations be made? Maybe a specific person, maybe a particular ministry. And whoever's getting the recommendations, are they empowered to implement them? That's a crucial question, isn't it? So at the end of an evaluation, you say, well, look, this is a recommendation which needs to go within the university. Say in a social work program, it's something about tutorial accommodation. I'm just plucking something out of the air. And let's say the evaluation says the students thought and the faculty thought and everybody thought there needed to be more space for individual tuition. And let's say the report comes out with that recommendation. Who do they make it to? Do they make it to the head of department? Do they make it to the dean? Do they make it to the rector? Different answers, different universities. But it's always important for the evaluation to know who the recommendations are going to. Well, friends, that has been a very quick romp through program evaluation. I hope at least now you've got some idea what it is. You'll gather that I'm personally an advocate of it. I think it's great. It's given me a living for the last 10 years, so it must be good. And I finished up with some tips. Those tips are also part of a textbook. I'm not going to recommend the textbook. I'm going to avoid the professorial trap. But I think if you follow those tips at the end, it'll give you a good start with the program evaluation. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation, and I hope every social worker and everybody else in this room will continue by innovating and evaluating.